They hang on museum walls, travel in armored vehicles, and rest behind laser grids and pressure-sensitive floors. They are insured for sums that rival the gross domestic product of small nations. They are studied in universities, reproduced on coffee mugs and hotel lobby prints, and taught to schoolchildren across 6 continents. They are, in the most literal sense, irreplaceable. And yet, they have been taken. The 10 cases presented in this documentary represent a combined estimated loss of over $650 million, a figure that accounts only for known market valuations and does not begin to capture the incalculable historical and cultural value of the works themselves. This is the record. This is the evidence. These are the missing masterpieces. Case 1. The Ghent Altarpiece. On the night of April 10, 1934, someone entered St. Bavo's Cathedral in Ghent, Belgium, and removed 2 panels from the most important painting in the history of European art. One panel came back. The other never did. The Ghent Altarpiece, formerly titled The Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, was completed in 1432 by the Flemish painters Hubert van Eyck and Jan van Eyck. Hubert died in 1426, and Jan is believed to have completed the project at the request of Jus Vid and his wife Elizabeth Borlet, who commissioned the work for their chapel in the Church of St. John the Baptist in Ghent, the building now known as St. Bavo's Cathedral, and had hung there, more or less continuously, for over 500 years at the time of the theft. From the moment it was installed, this enormous oil-on-oak polyptych astonished all who saw it, not just for its brilliant color and detail, but because it marked a turning point in European art, widely regarded as one of the earliest major examples of large-scale oil painting and a bridge from medieval to Renaissance techniques. Understanding why this painting matters requires a moment of context. The Ghent Altarpiece is not simply an old painting in an old church. Art historians credit it with a foundational role in the development of Western painting. It is widely considered the earliest surviving large-scale demonstration of the oil-on-panel technique applied with systematic mastery. That technique would define European painting for the following 4 centuries. The surface of its panels, the rendering of light and texture, the spatial complexity of the composition, all of it was without known precedent when it was completed in the early 15th century. UNESCO has designated it among the most important works of art in the world. No insurance valuation exists. Its cultural significance places it beyond any financial calculation. The altarpiece consists of 12 individual oak panels arranged across 2 tiers. When fully open, the structure measures approximately 3.5 meters in height and nearly 5 meters in width. The centerpiece of the lower register, the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, depicts a vast luminous landscape populated with hundreds of individually rendered figures moving toward a lamb standing on an altar at the center. That single panel has been the subject of continuous scholarly study for 600 years. By 1934, the altarpiece had already survived a remarkable number of threats. It had been removed from the cathedral during the 16th-century Calvinist iconoclasm. It had been seized by Napoleon's agents and displayed in the Louvre before being returned in 1815. It had been sold, in part, by a cathedral canon's heirs in the early 19th century, with the central panels eventually acquired by the Prussian Royal Museum in Berlin, where they remained until the Treaty of Versailles compelled their return to Belgium in 1920. The altarpiece also has the distinction of being, by a considerable margin, the most frequently stolen artwork in recorded history. Scholars and archivists have catalogued at minimum 13 separate incidents in which the altarpiece or individual panels were displaced without authorization or under conditions of force. No other single artwork in the documented record comes close to that number. But nothing in that history had produced a permanent loss. Until April of 1934. On the night in question, an individual or individuals entered the cathedral and removed 2 panels. The Just Judges, depicting a mounted procession of robed figures identified in theological tradition as the virtuous judges of biblical narrative, and St. John the Baptist, a companion panel positioned alongside it. The following morning, the St. John the Baptist panel was found. It had been left in a check room at a railway station in Brussels, with a ransom demand attached. The Just Judges was not with it. Belgian investigators began their work. The ransom correspondence was examined. Multiple lines of inquiry were pursued. Over weeks and months, The investigation narrowed its focus to a man named Arsène Godardie, a stockbroker from the town of Wetteren, approximately 20 kilometers southeast of Ghent. Godardie had come to the attention of investigators through the paper trail left by the ransom communications. He was considered a significant person of interest. He did not cooperate with the investigation. In November of 1934, Godardie suffered a heart attack. As he was dying, he reportedly communicated to those present that he alone knew the location of the missing panel. He died before providing that information. His estate was searched. His papers were reviewed. The Just Judges was not found. The investigation continued. It has never formally closed. In the years following the 1934 theft, the altarpiece faced its most extensive displacement. In 1940, following the German invasion of Belgium, civic authorities arranged for the altarpiece to be moved to the Château de Pau in southwestern France for safekeeping. In 1942, German authorities, acting under the personal directive of Adolf Hitler, who maintained a program for the acquisition of European artworks for a planned museum complex at Linz, Austria, ordered the altarpiece transferred to Germany. It was moved to Neuschwanstein Castle in Bavaria, joining a vast collection of cultural property accumulated under the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg. As Allied forces advanced in the final months of the war, the altarpiece was moved again, this time to the Altarpiece salt mine in Austria, selected for its stable temperature and humidity. In May of 1945, American forces of the Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program located and secured the mine. The Ghent altarpiece was recovered and subsequently returned to Belgium. It was reinstalled in St. Bavo's Cathedral in 1951 following a comprehensive conservation assessment. The recovery of the altarpiece from the Altarpiece mine represented a significant achievement, but it did not resolve the 1934 theft. The Just Judges had not been among the panels seized by German authorities. It had been missing before the war began, and it remained missing after the war ended. In 2010, the Royal Institute for Cultural Heritage of Belgium initiated one of the most technically comprehensive analyses ever conducted on a single artwork, applying multispectral imaging, X-ray fluorescence mapping, and infrared reflectography across the altarpiece's panels. The examination produced significant new findings regarding the contributions of both Van Eyck brothers and revealed compositional revisions that had not been previously documented. A large-scale restoration project began in 2012, funded by the Getty Foundation and Belgian public institutions. Work has proceeded in phases, with individual panels treated and returned to display in a newly configured space within the cathedral. The search for the Just Judges has continued alongside the restoration. In 2020, a Belgian researcher published a detailed analysis proposing a specific location in Ghent where the panel may have been concealed at the time of or shortly after the theft. The proposed location was investigated. The panel was not found. The panel currently displayed in the Just Judges position at St. Bavo's Cathedral is a reproduction, commissioned in 1945. The original has not been seen since the night it was taken. The altarpiece receives over 600,000 visitors per year. It is simultaneously a functioning religious object, a major cultural heritage site, and the subject of an active theft investigation that has been running, without resolution, for over 90 years. 90 years since the last confirmed sighting. One man who claimed to know where it was, and a deathbed that closed the only door anyone had found. The case is open. The panel is gone, and the question Arsène Godardie took with him has never been answered. Case 2. The Mona Lisa. On August 21, 1911, a man walked out of the Louvre Museum in Paris with the most famous painting in the world hidden under his coat. No alarm sounded. No guard intervened. Nobody noticed the painting was gone until the following morning. And when they did notice, the first assumption was that it had simply been moved for a routine photography session. The Louvre had just lost the Mona Lisa, and it would be 2 years and 7 months before it came back. The painting, catalogued as Portrait of Lisa Girardini, wife of Francesco del Giocondo, known universally as the Mona Lisa, was, in 1911, a significant but not uniquely celebrated work in the Louvre's collection. It was not the most visited painting in the museum. It had not achieved anything approaching its current status. It hung in the Salon Care with no special protection, no dedicated security presence, no measures beyond the standard arrangements applied to most of the collection. Leonardo da Vinci began work on the portrait in approximately 1503. It was almost certainly commissioned by the Florentine merchant Francesco del Giocondo, likely to mark the birth of his second son and the family's new home. The subject is believed to be Lisa Gerardini, Francesco's wife. The work is executed in oil on poplar panel and measures approximately 77 centimeters in height by 53 centimeters in width. Leonardo is believed to have worked on it across an extended period and kept it with him until his death in 1519. After his death, it entered the collection of Francis I of France, eventually making its way to the Louvre following the French Revolution. By 1911, it had been in the Louvre's collection for over a century. The man who took it was named Vincenzo Perugia. He was an Italian-born handyman who had worked at the Louvre in 1910 as part of a crew installing protective glass cases on several of the museum's paintings. That work gave him a detailed understanding of the building's layout, its daily operational rhythms, and, critically, the means by which a person might conceal themselves in a storage space after public hours and before the overnight staff completed their rounds. On the evening of Sunday, August 20th, 1911, Perugia did exactly that. He concealed himself in a supply closet inside the Louvre and waited. The following morning was Monday, the one day of the week the museum was closed to the public, when staff movement through the galleries was reduced and oversight was lighter. Perugia emerged from the closet, located the Mona Lisa in the salon care, lifted it from the wall, and carried it to a service stairwell. He removed the panel from its protective framing box, placed it under his work smock, and walked out of the building through a service door. The theft was not discovered until the morning of Tuesday, August 22nd, a full day after the panel had left the building. A museum worker noticed the empty wall. The initial response within the institution was not alarm. The assumption was that the painting had been removed for photography, a routine and regularly scheduled practice that required no special notification to gallery staff. It was only when the photography department confirmed that no such removal had been authorized that the matter was reported to French police. What followed was one of the most extensive investigations in French criminal history to that point. Prefect Louis Lapine directed a process that included interviews with approximately 60 museum staff and hundreds of additional witnesses. Physical evidence was collected, including fingerprints from the glass case that had enclosed the painting. Those prints were cross-referenced against French police records, but the records were incomplete. The match that could have identified Perugia was not made. Among those questioned was the poet and writer Guillaume Apollinaire, who had a prior association with an individual who had stolen small antiquities from the Louvre years earlier. Apollinaire was briefly detained. Pablo Picasso, connected to the same prior matter, was also interviewed. Neither man was charged in relation to the Mona Lisa. The investigation continued. The painting did not surface. Weeks passed, then months. The empty wall in the salon care became, in a phenomenon widely documented by French journalists of the time, an attraction in its own right. Visitors came to the Louvre specifically to stand where the painting had hung. French newspapers ran the story continuously. International press carried it across Europe and into the Americas. The Mona Lisa, which had been a significant but not widely discussed work in the Louvre's collection, became the most talked about painting in the world, precisely because it was gone. Art historians have since written extensively about this transformation. Before 1911, the Mona Lisa was known to art scholars and to visitors of the Louvre. After 1911, it was known to everyone. The theft did not damage the painting's reputation. It created the reputation the painting now has. Meanwhile, Vincenzo Perugia had taken the panel back to Florence on a train, without incident, the morning after the theft. He had brought it to his apartment at 4 Via Ponzani and placed it in a wooden trunk under his bed. He had convinced himself that the painting was rightfully Italian, that Napoleon Bonaparte had taken it from Italy, and that his act was a patriotic repatriation. This belief was factually incorrect. The painting had been legitimately acquired by Francis I of France. It had never been in Napoleon's possession. But Perugia was not persuaded by the historical record, and for 2 years and 7 months, the world's most famous painting stayed in a trunk under a bed in Florence. In November of 1913, Perugia made a move. He contacted an antiquities dealer in Florence named Alfredo Geri, describing a painting he wished to sell. Jerry was suspicious. He consulted with Giovanni Paggi, director of the Uffizi Gallery. Together they arranged a meeting with Perugia and examined the panel. They confirmed its authenticity against existing photographs and documentary records. Then they contacted Italian authorities. Perugia was arrested on December 11, 1913. He was tried in Florence in June of 1914. His argument, that the painting was rightfully Italian and that his act was one of patriotic principle, was examined by the court and rejected. He was convicted of theft and sentenced to 1 year and 15 days of imprisonment, subsequently reduced on appeal to approximately 7 months. The Mona Lisa was returned to France in January of 1914. It was briefly displayed at the Uffizi in Florence and the Borghese Gallery in Rome before the journey back to Paris. It was reinstalled at the Louvre on January 4, 1914. In 1956, 2 separate incidents caused damage to the painting, first from an acid attack on its lower portion, then from a thrown stone. Both instances of damage were subsequently treated. In 1974, during a loan display at the Tokyo National Museum, a visitor attempted to spray paint on the painting. The attempt did not succeed. The Mona Lisa has not left France since that visit. The painting is currently displayed in the Salle des Etats, a gallery configured specifically for its exhibition, behind bulletproof, climate-controlled glass, with a barrier preventing approach within 2 meters. A security presence monitors the gallery continuously. The 1911 theft is studied by investigative institutions and museum security professionals as a landmark case, not because the method was sophisticated, but because the consequences were transformative. The security failures it exposed changed how major institutions approached the protection of their collections. And the cultural phenomenon it produced, the conversion of a significant painting into the most famous artwork in the world through the act of its absence, has never been replicated. An Italian handyman with a wooden trunk and a misread history. A city that spent 2 years visiting an empty wall. And a painting that became irreplaceable partly because, for a time, it was simply not there. Case 3. The Storm on the Sea of Galilee. On March 18, 1990, 2 people walked into a Boston museum in the early hours of the morning, showed a security guard a badge, and spent the next 81 minutes removing 13 works of art from the walls. Then they left. And in the 35 years since, not one of those 13 works has been found. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum sits on the Fenway in Boston, Massachusetts. It was founded by the socialite, traveler, and collector Isabella Stewart Gardner and opened to the public in 1903. Its collection spans centuries: European paintings, drawings, sculpture, tapestries, and decorative arts assembled over a lifetime of acquisition. Gardner's founding deed of gift required that the collection remain displayed exactly as she arranged it during her lifetime. That provision remains in force today, which is why, in the Dutch room of the Gardner Museum, there are empty frames on the walls. Not bare walls. Frames. Placed precisely where the stolen paintings once hung, maintained in position by the terms of the institution's founding documents, serving as a permanent document of what is missing. Among the works that once occupied those frames was The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, completed by Rembrandt van Rijn in 1633. The work holds a distinction in the artist's catalog that no other painting shares. It is the only seascape Rembrandt ever produced. In a body of work encompassing hundreds of portraits, biblical scenes, self-examinations, and landscapes, there is exactly one painting of the sea. That singularity alone makes the work irreplaceable in a way that exceeds its estimated value of approximately $100 million. The composition depicts the moment described in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, in which Christ calms a storm threatening to overwhelm a vessel carrying his disciples. The vessel is shown at a sharp diagonal, crew members working at the rigging and helm as waves cross the deck. Christ is at the stern. 14 figures populate the composition, each rendered with individual psychological specificity. The handling of partially obscured light and the rendering of the sea conditions are considered by art historians to be characteristic of Rembrandt's technical maturity. Gardner acquired the painting around the turn of the 20th century. It was displayed in the Dutch room from the museum's opening in 1903 until the night of March 17 to 18, 1990. That night, the museum was staffed by 2 security guards working the overnight shift. At approximately 1:24 in the morning, two individuals approached the side entrance of the building. They were dressed in attire consistent with Boston Police Department uniforms. They told the guard on duty, Richard Abath, that they were police officers responding to a disturbance report in the area and needed to come inside. Abath admitted them without contacting the Boston Police Department to verify the claim. This was a direct violation of established museum security protocol. Once inside, the individuals ordered Abath and a second guard, Randy Heston, to identify themselves. Both guards were handcuffed to pipes in the museum's basement and had tape applied over their eyes. Neither sustained injuries. The individuals then moved through the museum. They knew what they wanted. They moved to the galleries, removed works from the walls, and operated without interruption for 81 minutes. When they left, they took 13 works of art and a finial from a Napoleonic flagstaff. The stolen works included 5 drawings by Edgar Degas, 3 paintings by Rembrandt van Rijn, among them The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, 1 painting by Johannes Vermeer, 1 painting by Edouard Manet, and a small work on wood attributed to the school of Govert Flinck. The theft was discovered when Abath freed himself and activated the museum's alarm. Boston police arrived. The Federal Bureau of Investigation assumed jurisdiction given the scale of the crime. The Gardner Museum theft is the largest property crime in United States history as measured by the total value of items taken. The combined estimated value of the 13 stolen works has been assessed at between $300 million and $500 million across various appraisals. The initial investigation examined multiple persons of interest, including individuals with documented connections to organized crime networks operating in the Boston and Philadelphia areas. Richard Abath was extensively investigated in connection with the circumstances of the entry. No charges were brought against him. The investigation continued across years, then decades. In 2013, the FBI made a public announcement of significance. Investigators had identified the individuals responsible for the theft. Those individuals, the FBI stated, were connected to an organized crime network operating across the Philadelphia and New England regions. The FBI further stated that both individuals were deceased. The location of the works, however, remained unknown. 2 years later, in 2015, the FBI disclosed additional investigative findings. The stolen works, the Bureau stated, had been transported to the Philadelphia area following the theft. The paintings had been offered for sale on at least 2 documented occasions in the years that followed the crime. This was the most detailed public disclosure in the history of the case. It did not lead to recovery. In 2023, cooperation with European law enforcement agencies was reported, following the development of intelligence suggesting that at least some of the stolen works may have been moved outside the United States. As of 2026, none of the 13 stolen works has been recovered. The investigation remains active. The reward offered by the Gardner Museum for information leading to the safe return of the stolen works stands at $10 million. It has never been claimed. The empty frames remain in the Dutch room, required by the terms of the founding deed to remain exactly where the paintings once hung. A standing, permanent record of what was taken. 81 minutes. 13 works. A reward that has stood for 35 years. And not a single painting found. Case 4. The concert. The paintings taken from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in March of 1990 were not chosen at random. The individuals who moved through those galleries for 81 minutes took works by Rembrandt, Degas, Manet, Vermeer, artists whose names any reasonably informed person in any major city in the world would recognize. They left behind works that might, in other contexts, have commanded attention. The selection was deliberate. And among the deliberate selections was a painting that, as of 2026, carries the specific designation of being the most valuable unrecovered stolen artwork in the world. The concert, painted by Johannes Vermeer of Delft in the early to mid-1660s, hangs nowhere. It is in no museum, no gallery, no documented private collection. It has not been publicly exhibited since the night it was taken. Its current physical condition, its condition right now, wherever it is unknown. Vermeer is among the most revered painters of the Dutch Golden Age and the most sparsely documented. Only 34 to 36 works are currently attributed to him, with scholarly consensus. This is not a large catalog. Many significant artists from the same period produced works numbering in the hundreds. Vermeer's output, for reasons that remain incompletely understood, possibly illness, possibly the demands of his family and business, possibly the extended time he devoted to individual canvases, is extraordinarily small. The consequence of that scarcity is that each individual Vermeer painting represents an outsized fraction of everything the scholarly record contains about how he worked, what he thought about, and what he was capable of. The loss of any one of them is not like losing a single work from an artist with a catalog of 300 paintings. It is, as Vermeer scholars have consistently described it, like losing an entire chapter from a book that already existed only in fragments. The concert depicts three figures engaged in a domestic musical performance in a characteristically Vermeer interior. Light enters from the left. A woman is seated at a harpsichord, her back to the viewer. A second woman stands to the left, apparently singing. A man is visible at the right side of the composition, turned partially away. Two paintings hang on the wall in the background, a landscape and a work by Dirk van Baburen depicting a similar domestic scene, a painting known to have been in the possession of Vermeer's mother-in-law. The inclusion of those background paintings is characteristic of Vermeer's compositional method, spaces within spaces, domestic interiors as subjects of layered, precise observation. Isabella Stewart Gardner acquired the concert at auction in Paris in 1892. It was displayed at the Gardner Museum from its opening in 1903. It hung in the Dutch Room, the same room as the Rembrandt Seascape from Case 3, until the night of March 17 to 18, 1990. The circumstances of the theft are those already documented. The same two individuals. The same falsified police approach. The same 81-minute window. What is specific to the concert is the manner of its removal. The individuals cut the canvas from its stretcher using a blade instrument, separating the painted surface from the wooden support structure that had held it in tension for over 300 years. Cutting a canvas from its stretcher allows a large painting to be transported more compactly. It also places the canvas under significant mechanical stress. Paint loss, cracking, and tearing are all potential consequences of the separation, and they can worsen over time depending on how the canvas is subsequently handled, whether it is rolled, folded, exposed to changes in temperature or humidity, or moved without appropriate conservation materials. The precise physical condition of the concert is entirely unknown. It has not been examined by any documented party since March 18, 1990. The FBI investigation that encompasses the storm on the Sea of Galilee also encompasses the concert. The investigative disclosures of 2013 and 2015, the identification of the thieves as deceased members of an organized crime network, the confirmed transport to the Philadelphia area, the documented attempts to sell the works, apply to this painting as they do to all 13 stolen items. What distinguishes the concert in the public record is the scale of what its disappearance represents and the specific way that loss has been registered in the scholarly community. In 2022, the Mauritshuis in The Hague and the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam mounted a major retrospective exhibition of Vermeer's work, the most comprehensive gathering of his paintings ever attempted. Of the approximately 35 works attributed to him, 28 were assembled for display. The concert was not among them. Its position in the exhibition catalog was documented with a reproduction photograph and a notation explaining its absence. Multiple critical reviews of the exhibition specifically addressed the gap. The Art Loss Register currently lists the concert as its highest valued entry. Estimated at approximately $200 million, the painting cannot legally be offered at auction, displayed in any public institution, or transferred to any documented collection without triggering an immediate investigative and legal response. If it is being held anywhere in the world, the holder is in possession of something that cannot be legitimately used. As of 2026, the investigation is active. The reward stands. The frame in the Dutch Room at the Gardner Museum remains empty, required by the terms of the founding deed to stay exactly where the painting once hung. $200 million. Approximately 1/35 of Vermeer's known life work. 35 years. And an empty frame in Boston that, by the terms of the institution that holds it, may only ever be filled by the original. Case 5. Portrait of a young man. In late 1939, a A Raphael painting that had been part of a Polish aristocratic collection for over a century was seized by German occupying authorities and taken to Krakow. For the next several years, it was displayed in the official residence of the Governor-General of occupied Poland. Then, in the final months of the war, it was moved. And after that, nothing. No confirmed sighting. No recovery. No credible documented account of where it went. Over 80 years later, it is still missing. The portrait of a young man, attributed to Raphael Sani and dated to approximately 1513 or 1514, is executed in oil on panel. Its estimated value is approximately $100 million. It depicts a young man of apparent refinement in three-quarter profile against a dark background, a composition characteristic of Raphael's mature portraiture from the final decade of his life, when he was simultaneously engaged in major Vatican commissions, Roman noble patronage, and work for the papal court. The precise identity of the subject remains a matter of scholarly discussion. Various historians have proposed connections to Italian court circles of the early 16th century, though no identification has achieved consensus. What is not in dispute is the quality of the work or the period of its production. Raphael's portraiture from this decade is considered among the finest of the 16th century, integrating Florentine compositional discipline, Venetian colorism, and a psychological directness that scholars associate with his experience of Roman intellectual culture. The portrait of a young man is considered a fully realized example of his capability at this height. The painting entered the Czartoryski family collection in Poland in the late 18th century. Princess Isabella Czartoryska assembled the collection as part of a broader cultural effort to preserve European art and artifacts, acquiring works for the family's museum at Puławy. The Raphael was displayed alongside other significant pieces, including Leonardo da Vinci's Lady with an Ermine, also a Czartoryski acquisition, also housed in Krakow, and a painting that would share the Raphael's wartime fate in some respects, though not all. When the German invasion of Poland began on September 1, 1939, the Czartoryski family moved quickly. Emergency relocation procedures were initiated for their most significant holdings. The Raphael and other major works were transported from Krakow to the family's estate at Sieniawa, where they were concealed. German forces located the estate. The hidden works were found. The paintings were seized. The portrait of a young man was transferred to the General Government headquarters in Krakow, where it came under the personal supervision of Hans Frank, the senior Nazi official serving as Governor-General of occupied Poland. Documentary evidence and post-war testimony indicate that Frank displayed the Raphael in his official residence throughout his time in office, alongside other appropriated artworks, including the Leonardo. The Lady with an Ermine remained with Frank through the duration of the occupation. The Raphael did too, until the end. As Allied forces advanced in late 1944 and early 1945, Frank ordered the artworks in his residence moved. The Lady with an Ermine was among those located by Allied forces and returned to Poland, where it now hangs in the Czartoryski Museum in Krakow. The portrait of a young man was not among the recovered works. Where it went after Frank ordered it moved has not been established by any investigation, testimony, or document discovered in the 8 decades since. Hans Frank was captured by Allied forces in May of 1945. He was tried at the Nuremberg International Military Tribunal on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The trial record includes extensive documentation of Frank's systematic seizure of cultural property across occupied Poland. He was convicted. He was executed in October of 1946. The specific fate of the Raphael portrait was not established in the Nuremberg proceedings. Frank did not disclose it. Polish authorities, the Czartoryski family, and international art recovery organizations have investigated the painting's whereabouts across 3/4 of a century. The Commission for Cultural Property Losses during World War II, operating under the Polish Ministry of Culture and National Heritage, has maintained the Raphael as a priority case throughout its existence. 3 primary hypotheses have been developed and examined. The first is that the painting was transferred, in the final months of the war, to a private buyer in Germany or Austria, possibly as part of an arrangement providing Frank or associates with funds or safe passage amid the collapsing German military position. The second is that the painting was transported to South America following the war, a route taken by other displaced cultural property that was traced to that region in the post-war decades. The third is that the painting was destroyed through fire, water damage, or deliberate concealment that went irreversibly wrong during the chaotic final weeks of the conflict in Central Europe. None of these three hypotheses has been confirmed. None has been conclusively eliminated. The Czartoryski Museum was acquired by the Polish state in 2016 for €100 million, partly to consolidate institutional support for the recovery of lost collection items. The portrait of a young man remains the most significant of those items. The Polish Ministry of Culture and National Heritage formally designates the portrait of a young man as the single most important missing cultural object from Polish national collections. The Commission for Cultural Property Losses continues to maintain the case as an active priority. Interpol holds an active record. The Art Loss Register lists it as the highest value artwork missing as a direct result of wartime plunder. A painter at the height of his powers. A portrait that survived 5 centuries before 1939. A war that ended over 80 years ago. And a question, where did Frank's men take it? That no investigation has yet answered. Case 6. Nativity with St. Francis and St. Lawrence. In October of 1969, a Caravaggio painting was removed from a chapel altar in Palermo, Sicily, in the middle of the night. In the decades that followed, multiple individuals provided testimony about it in the context of Italian organized crime proceedings. Their accounts described a painting that had passed through criminal hands, been used as a financial instrument, sustained damage, and, according to at least one witness, been destroyed. Investigators have not accepted the destruction account as established. The case remains open, and the painting, if it still exists, has now been missing for over 55 years. The Nativity with St. Francis and St. Lawrence was painted by Michelangelo Merisi de Caravaggio in 1609. It is executed in oil on canvas, a large-format devotional work measuring approximately 268 centimeters in height by 197 centimeters in width. Its current estimated market value is approximately $20 million. The painting was produced during one of the most turbulent periods of the artist's life. Caravaggio had been living as a fugitive since 1606, following a killing in Rome. His path through Naples, Malta, and Sicily during these years is documented through the commissions he accepted along the route. Works that share a distinctive quality, noted by art historians, of intense psychological interiority. The figures in his late paintings carry a weight and stillness that scholars connect to the circumstances of their production. The Nativity was commissioned for the Oratorio di San Lorenzo in Palermo, the Oratory of the Compagnia di San Francesco, and is believed to have been executed during a period when Caravaggio was briefly in Palermo, in transit. The composition places the Christ child at the center, flanked by the Virgin Mary, Saint Francis of Assisi, and Saint Lawrence, with an angel descending from the upper left. The technique is characteristic of his mature work. Extreme contrast between deep shadow and focused illumination, figures emerging from darkness with a quality that art historians describe as physically immediate. The painting occupied the altar of the Oratorio di San Lorenzo for 360 years. The oratory is a remarkable interior space, notable for its elaborate stucco decorations by the sculptor Giacomo Serpata, but it was not a heavily trafficked tourist destination, and security measures in place at the time of the theft were minimal. On the night of October 18, 1969, the Nativity was removed from the altar. The canvas was separated from its frame using a blade instrument. The process is consistent with the work of individuals who understood how to detach a large-format canvas from its physical support. The theft was not immediately discovered. When it was, the Carabinieri Tutela Patrimonio Culturale, Italy's specialist cultural property crime unit, initiated an investigation. Physical evidence at the scene was not sufficient to identify the individuals responsible. Investigation in the following years developed within the context of broader law enforcement attention to organized crime activity in Palermo. Investigators established connections between the theft and criminal networks operating in the region. Over the following 3 decades, that connection deepened, not through physical evidence, but through testimony. Multiple cooperating witnesses, individuals providing accounts in the context of anti-mafia proceedings before Italian courts, included information about the Caravaggio nativity in their testimony at various points between the 1980s and the early 2000s. Gaspar Mutolo, in proceedings before the court of Palermo in the early 1990s, testified that the painting had come into the possession of organized crime figures in Palermo and had been used as a form of collateral in negotiations between criminal groups. The painting, in this account, was a financial instrument, something to be offered and withheld rather than displayed or sold. Salvatore Cansimi, testifying in the mid-1990s, provided a different emphasis. The painting, Cansimi stated, had sustained damage either during or after the theft. That damage had complicated attempts to use the work effectively, making it harder to sell, harder to transfer, harder to leverage. A third witness, Francesco Marino Manoia, went further. In testimony provided in 2002, Manoia stated that the painting had been destroyed, that following the damage it sustained, it had become too compromised to be of value and had been disposed of. Investigators reviewed all three accounts. They noted the inconsistencies between them. They noted that the complete destruction of a large canvas painting of this type would be a difficult and time-consuming undertaking. They noted that Manoia's account lacked independent corroboration, and they reached a position that has not changed in the years since. The destruction of the painting has not been established as fact. The case continues to be treated as potentially recoverable. In 2018, the Palermo-based Anti-Mafia Commission issued a report stating that investigators had grounds to believe the painting remained in existence. No recovery followed. In 2023, the Oratorio di San Lorenzo completed a major restoration of the Serpata interior. A high-resolution digital reproduction of the Caravaggio was installed at the altar position. The investigation is currently conducted jointly by the Carabinieri Tutela Patrimonio Culturale and the FBI Art Crime Team, which assumed a cooperating role in 2012. As of 2026, the painting's location is unknown and the case is formally open. 3 witnesses. 3 accounts that do not fully align. A destroyed painting or a hidden one. And an investigation in 2 countries that has declined, for over 50 years, to close the file. Case 7. The Scream. On February 12, 1994, the opening day of the Winter Olympic Games in Lillehammer, Norway, 2 individuals climbed through a ground-floor window at the National Gallery in Oslo, walked to the wall where the Scream was hanging, removed it, climbed back out, and left. The entire operation took less than 60 seconds. They also left a note. It read, "Thanks for the poor security." The Scream, in Norwegian, skrik, is the most recognizable image in the career of Edvard Munch, the Norwegian expressionist painter and printmaker, and one of the most widely reproduced works in the history of art. Munch produced multiple versions of the composition across different media, 2 paintings, 2 pastels, and a lithograph. The image depicts a figure on a walkway or pier, hands raised to either side of its head, set against a sky rendered in swirling layers of orange, red, and blue. 2 other figures stand in the background, their posture undisturbed. Munch described the origin of the image in his diary as a moment of acute psychological distress during a walk, a sensation of anguish that he perceived as passing through the landscape around him. The version held by the National Gallery of Norway, completed in 1893 in a mixed technique of oil, tempera, and casein on cardboard, is the version most associated with the image in public consciousness. It was this version that was taken in 1994. For market reference, one of the 4 versions of the Scream sold at auction in 2012 for approximately $120 million, though that was a different version from the one stolen. The window through which the individuals entered had been left open for ventilation. No special measures had been taken to prevent entry through it. The theft occurred in the early morning hours, before the museum opened to the public. The note left at the scene suggested that the timing on the opening day of the Lillehammer Games, when international press attention on Norway was at its highest, was deliberate. Norwegian police and Interpol launched a joint investigation immediately. The investigation combined conventional inquiry with the deployment of undercover operatives. Working in coordination with British law enforcement, Norwegian investigators developed intelligence pointing toward individuals in the Ålesund area of Norway who were seeking to sell the painting. A sting operation was coordinated. The painting was recovered on May 7, 1994. Its physical condition was assessed as generally intact. Minor damage was noted at the lower corner of the work. Among those arrested was Paul Enger, a Norwegian individual with a prior criminal conviction for the theft of another Munch painting. Enger was convicted in connection with the 1994 theft and sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. The painting was returned to the National Gallery and security measures were enhanced. The case appeared resolved. The painting was back. The perpetrator had been convicted, but the story of the scream and theft was not finished. On August 22, 2004, the date of Edvard Munch's birth, 2 individuals walked into the Munch Museum in Oslo during regular visiting hours. The museum was open. Staff were present. The alarm system was operational. The individuals approached the display position of the Munch Museum's version of the Scream, a tempera painting distinct from the National Gallery version, and a companion work, Madonna, painted in 1894. Using a firearm to deter intervention by museum staff, they removed both paintings from the wall and walked out through the main entrance. No staff member or visitor was injured. The theft was witnessed by multiple people and recorded on the museum's security camera system. Investigators analyzed the footage. Combined with witness accounts, it provided a detailed basis for identifying the individuals involved. The vehicle used was traced. 4 individuals were subsequently arrested. Proceedings before the Norwegian courts produced convictions for 3 of them, with sentences ranging from 4 to 8 years. A 4th individual received a shorter sentence. The recovery of both paintings was achieved by Norwegian police on August 31, 2004, 9 days after the theft. Both works had sustained damage during the period of their absence. The Munch Museum's version of the Scream showed evidence of moisture exposure. Madonna had tears and abrasions. Conservation treatment for both began immediately and was completed by 2008. The 2004 theft prompted a fundamental institutional reassessment. The Munch Museum undertook a process that ultimately resulted in the construction of an entirely new facility. The Munch Museum at Bjørvika, designed by architect Juan Herreros and completed in 2021. The new building incorporates multi-layered electronic monitoring, physical security infrastructure, and operational protocols specifically developed in response to the vulnerabilities the 2004 theft had exposed. The National Gallery's version of the Scream is now displayed at the National Museum of Norway, opened in 2022, and among the most comprehensively secured cultural institutions in Scandinavia. Both stolen versions of the Scream were recovered. Both perpetrator groups were prosecuted. The cases are closed in terms of criminal accountability. The paintings are not missing. They are on public display in Oslo. What makes these cases significant in the documentary record is not the outcomes. It is the process that produced them. 2 thefts a decade apart. 2 separate institutions. 2 different security failures. And 2 investigations that, through different methods and different timelines, resulted in recovery and conviction. A note that said, "Thanks for the poor security." A theft in daylight, through a front door, in front of witnesses. And 2 investigations that demonstrated what can be achieved when law enforcement resources are applied with precision. Case 8. Poppy Flowers. In 2010, a painting by Vincent van Gogh was removed from a museum in Cairo, Egypt, during a weekend afternoon. The security cameras were not working. The alarm connected to the painting had not been activated. There were not enough staff on duty to adequately cover the galleries. A parliamentary investigation later documented all of this in formal findings. Multiple museum officials were suspended. An institutional review was ordered. The painting has not been found. What makes this case unlike any other in this documentary is not the institutional failure of 2010, though that failure was significant and extensively documented. It is the fact that the same painting had been stolen from the same museum once before, in 1977, and recovered. Poppy Flowers, also catalogued as Vase with Viscarias and Poppies, was produced by Vincent van Gogh in 1887 during his 2 years in Paris. The work is executed in oil on canvas and depicts a vase of red poppies and other flowers rendered in the vigorous directional brushwork and saturated color that characterized Van Gogh's Paris period, when he was directly exposed to Impressionism and to the chromatic experiments of Seurat and Signac. Its estimated value is approximately $55 million. The painting is part of the collection of the Mohammed Mahmoud Khalil Museum in Cairo. The museum was built around the private collection of Mohammed Mahmud Khalil, an Egyptian political figure and art collector whose acquisitions across the late 19th and early 20th century assembled one of the most significant bodies of European Impressionist and Post-Impressionist art on the African continent. The collection includes works by Monet, Gauguin, and Renoir. Khalil bequeathed his villa and collection to the Egyptian state, and the museum was opened to the public in his name. The Van Gogh was among the highest valued items in the collection. The first theft, in 1977, removed the painting from the museum. The details of that investigation, the methods used, the individuals identified, the precise circumstances of what followed, have not been fully disclosed in publicly available records. What is documented is the outcome. The painting was recovered. It was returned to the museum. It was reinstalled, and it remained there for over 3 decades. The second theft occurred on August 21, 2010. The painting was removed during weekend visiting hours. How it was taken, and by whom, was not captured on camera, because the cameras were not functioning. The parliamentary investigation that followed established the specific failures in sequence. The security camera system had developed a malfunction and had not been repaired. The alarm linked directly to the Van Gogh had not been triggered. The number of staff present that day was insufficient to provide adequate coverage of the galleries. The theft was discovered when a staff member noticed the empty wall position. The Egyptian Ministry of Culture was notified. An investigation was initiated involving Egyptian police, the Ministry of Antiquities, and Interpol. Multiple museum officials were suspended following the parliamentary review. A broader review of security protocols across Egyptian state-owned cultural institutions was ordered. The investigation proceeded within a period of significant political disruption. The theft occurred in August of 2010, approximately 5 months before the January 2011 uprising that led to the resignation of President Hosni Mubarak. The political transition that followed placed considerable pressure on Egyptian state institutions, affecting investigative continuity and resource allocation across multiple government departments, including those with responsibility for cultural property crime. No arrest directly connected to the 2010 theft of poppy flowers has been documented in publicly available records as of 2026. The painting has not been recovered. Interpol maintains an active record for the work. The Art Loss Register lists it as a current missing item. The FBI art crime team has cooperated with Egyptian and European law enforcement in connection with the case. The Mohammed Mahmud Khalil Museum has since installed new camera systems, updated alarm infrastructure, and revised staffing protocols. The same painting, the same museum, stolen twice, recovered once, and a parliamentary record that documents, line by line, how the second theft was made possible by failures that should not have occurred, in an institution that already knew what it felt like to lose this painting once before. Case 9. Le Pigeon, aux Petits Pois. In May of 2010, 5 paintings valued at a combined $163 million were removed from a Paris museum in a single-night operation. The individual responsible was identified, prosecuted, and convicted. He received a prison sentence. In court, he claimed he had thrown the paintings in a bin. None of the 5 paintings has ever been found. The Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris, the Municipal Museum of Modern Art on the Avenue du President Wilson, holds a permanent collection covering the major movements of 20th-century art. Among its holdings at the time of the theft was Le Pigeon aux Petits Pois, the pigeon with green peas, painted by Pablo Picasso in 1911. The work is produced in oil on canvas, executed in the multi-perspective, fragmentary pictorial language of analytical cubism, the most technically rigorous phase of the movement Picasso had developed alongside Georges Braque in the years immediately preceding the First World War. It is estimated at approximately $28 million. The Picasso was not the only work taken. The 5 paintings removed that night were Le Pigeon aux Petits Pois by Picasso, Pastoral by Henri Matisse, estimated at approximately $112 million. L'Olivier Pres de l'Estaque by Georges Braque, estimated at approximately $6 million. La Femme aux Eventales by Amedeo Modigliani, estimated at approximately $21 million. And Nature Morte aux Chandelier by Ferdinand Léger, estimated at approximately $1,500,000. The combined value placed this theft among the largest aggregate art crimes in European history. The method of entry was established by investigators from the Paris Police Prefecture's Cultural Property Unit. At the rear of the museum, a window latch had been broken. The alarm circuit associated with that specific window had a documented malfunction. It had not been repaired prior to the night of the theft. The individual entered through the window, moved through the permanent collection galleries, removed the 5 paintings, cutting some from their frames, removing others directly from wall fixtures, and exited through the same window. The estimated duration of the operation inside the museum ranged between 15 minutes and 1 hour. The following morning, staff arriving at the museum discovered the empty positions on the gallery walls. The Paris Police Prefecture's Cultural Property Unit was activated. The Section de Recherche de la Gendarmerie Nationale was also engaged, given the scale of the theft. Surveillance footage from cameras positioned in the surrounding area and physical evidence collected at the scene gave investigators a basis for profiling the individual responsible. French police identified Jaron Tomic as the primary suspect. Tomic was known to investigative authorities as an individual with a criminal history involving high-value theft. He was arrested in 2011. Investigation also identified 2 additional individuals, an art dealer and an intermediary, whose involvement related to efforts made after the theft to identify buyers or dispose of the stolen works. All 3 were charged and brought to trial before the Paris Criminal Court. Proceedings resulted in convictions in December of 2011. Tomic received a sentence of 8 years imprisonment. His co-defendants received sentences of 6 years and 2 years respectively. All convictions were upheld on appeal. During the trial, Tomic provided his account of what had become of the paintings. He had been unable to find a buyer, he stated. The scale of the theft had made him concerned about discovery. He had, he claimed, placed the canvases in a rubbish container. Municipal waste services had collected them. They had been destroyed. Investigators examined this account carefully. No corroborating evidence was found to confirm it. No corroborating evidence was found to refute it. The fate of 5 paintings collectively valued at $163 million could not be determined from the available evidence on either side. None of the 5 paintings has been recovered. The Art Loss Register and Interpol maintain active records for all 5 works. French cultural authorities have not closed the possibility that the works may yet be located. The case remains formally open as of 2026. The claim that 5 paintings worth $163 million were placed in a bin and collected with household rubbish is, in investigative terms, unverified. What is verified is this: a conviction was secured, a sentence was served, and not one of the 5 stolen works has been found. Whether Le Pigeon aux Petits Pois still exists somewhere in the world, or whether it ended in the way the convicted individual described, remains an open question in the formal investigative record. 1 broken window latch. 1 unrepaired alarm. $163 million. 1 conviction. 0 recoveries. And 1 account, given under oath, that no investigation has been able to confirm or contradict. Case 10. Portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer. In 1938, a painting was taken from a Jewish family in Vienna. The people it was taken from were forced to flee their country. The institutions that took the painting held it for decades, arguing in legal proceedings that they had the right to keep it. The family that lost it spent years pursuing every available legal avenue to get it back. This is the story of what that process looked like, how long it took, what it required, and what it eventually produced. The portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer was painted by Gustav Klimt between approximately 1903 and 1907. It is executed in oil, silver, and gold on canvas and is considered the definitive statement of what scholars call Klimt's golden phase, a period in which he incorporated gold leaf and gold paint directly into his compositions, producing surfaces that combine the visual language of Byzantine mosaic art with the aspirations of symbolist painting. The work is technically distinct from almost everything else in the history of European portraiture. The subject is Adele Bloch-Bauer, wife of the Austro-Hungarian industrialist Ferdinand Bloch-Bauer. The Bloch-Bauer family was one of the most prominent Jewish families in the intellectual and cultural life of late Habsburg Vienna. Ferdinand was a significant patron of Klimt, commissioning 2 portraits of Adele and several landscape paintings. The portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I shows its subject emerging from an abstract field of gold and silver leaf arranged in layered mosaic-like patterns. Art historians connect the approach to Byzantine art, medieval gold work, and the Japanese decorative arts that were a major influence on Klimt and the broader Vienna Secession. The figure's direct gaze gives the portrait a psychological authority that distinguishes it from the more decorative elements surrounding it. Adele Bloch-Bauer died in 1925. In her will, she expressed a preference, not a legally binding testamentary instruction, that her husband Ferdinand eventually donate the Klimt paintings to the Austrian State Gallery. Ferdinand, as the owner of the works, did not act on this preference in the years following Adele's death. Then came March of 1938. The Anschluss, the annexation of Austria by Nazi Germany, was completed in March of 1938. The legal and administrative machinery for the transfer of Jewish-owned property into German state control was activated immediately. Ferdinand Bloch-Bauer was compelled to leave Vienna. He fled to Czechoslovakia and then to Switzerland, leaving behind his residence, his business assets, and his art collection. The portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I and the second Klimt portrait of Adele were seized and transferred to the Österreichische Galerie Belvedere in Vienna. Austrian authorities would maintain, for the next 68 years, that the state's title to these works was legitimate. The argument rested on Adele's will, on the expressed preference she had documented in 1925 that the paintings eventually go to the state gallery. Austrian legal and cultural authorities held that this preference, combined with the transfer that had occurred, constituted a valid basis for state ownership. Ferdinand Bloch-Bauer died in Zurich in 1945. He had not recovered his collection. His surviving heirs, including his niece Maria Altmann, who had emigrated to Los Angeles, continued to pursue claims through available legal channels. The Austrian position did not change. In 1998, Austria passed the Art Restitution Law, which required state museums to conduct provenance reviews of works that may have been acquired through Nazi-era confiscation. The review of the Belvedere's holdings identified the Klimt paintings as candidates for restitution consideration. The Austrian Cultural Ministry disputed the legal claim. The matter was referred to arbitration within Austria. The proceedings did not produce the outcome the heirs sought. Maria Altmann, then in her 80s, chose a different path. In 2004, she filed suit in United States federal court against the Republic of Austria, seeking recognition of the Bloch-Bauer heirs' claim to 5 Klimt paintings held by the Belvedere. The case raised questions that had no clear precedent in international law: whether an American federal court could exercise jurisdiction over a foreign sovereign state in a civil property dispute, and whether the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act applied to claims rooted in Nazi-era confiscation. Austria argued it did not. The case was appealed. It reached the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in Altmann v. Republic of Austria that the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act permitted the suit to proceed in American federal court. The ruling was a landmark, watched by legal scholars, governments, museum administrators, and restitution advocates internationally as a significant expansion of the legal tools available to heirs of Nazi-era confiscation. Following the Supreme Court ruling, Austria and Altmann agreed to submit the dispute to a 3-member arbitration panel in Vienna. In January of 2006, the panel issued its decision. The ruling was unanimous. The Bloch-Bauer heirs were entitled to all 5 Klimt paintings. Austria accepted the ruling. After 68 years, the portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I was returned to the family it had been taken from. Maria Altmann subsequently consigned the portrait to Christie's New York. In June of 2006, it sold for $135 million, at the time, the highest auction price ever paid for a painting. The buyer was Ronald Lauder, the American collector who co-founded the Nui Gallery on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, a museum dedicated to early 20th century German and Austrian art. The painting was placed on permanent display at the Nui Gallery, where it has remained since 2006. The Altmann case produced legal precedents applied in subsequent restitution proceedings in American, European, and Israeli courts. The Washington Principles on Nazi-Confiscated Art, adopted in 1998 by 44 countries, and the Terrorism Declaration of 2009, provide the international framework within which the case is situated. As of 2026, significant numbers of restitution claims under these principles remain unresolved. The passage of 80 years since the end of the Second World War has created evidentiary and procedural challenges for claimants whose original documentation was itself destroyed during the conflict. The case was the subject of the 2015 biographical film Woman in Gold, which brought the story to an international audience. The portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I is on public display today at the Nui Gallery in New York. It is the most visited work in the museum's collection. It is not missing, but it was taken. And the distance between those two facts, between taken and returned, is 68 years, a Supreme Court ruling, an international arbitration decision, and the determination of a woman in her 80s who refused to accept the position that what was taken from her family could never come back. Let us be precise about where we are as of 2026. The Mona Lisa was stolen in 1911 and recovered in 1913. It is displayed at the Louvre. The Scream was stolen twice, in 1994 and 2004, and recovered on both occasions. It is displayed in Oslo. The portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I was confiscated in 1938 and restituted to its rightful heirs in 2006 following a United States Supreme Court ruling. It is displayed in New York. The Poppy Flowers by Van Gogh was stolen twice from the same museum in Cairo, recovered after the first theft in 1977, not recovered after the second theft in 2010. It is currently missing. 6 works remain unrecovered. The Just Judges panel of the Ghent Altarpiece has been missing since April of 1934. 92 years. The Storm on the Sea of Galilee and the Concert, both stolen from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, have been missing since March of 1990. 35 years. The FBI investigation is active. The reward stands at $10 million. The portrait of a young man by Raphael has been missing since late 1939. 85 years. The Nativity with St. Francis and St. Lawrence by Caravaggio has been missing since October of 1969. 55 years. Le Pigeon aux Petits Pois by Picasso has been missing since May of 2010, with the convicted thief's claim that it was destroyed neither confirmed nor refuted. The combined estimated market value of these 6 works is approximately $480 million. That number cannot capture what their absence means in scholarly terms. A seascape that is the only one its artist ever made. Approximately 1/35 of everything Vermeer produced. A Raphael last held by a man executed for war crimes. A Caravaggio that may have passed through criminal hands for decades. A Van Gogh taken twice. A Picasso whose fate rests on the unverified account of the person who took it. The investigative framework that pursues these cases has developed significantly since 1990. The FBI Art Crime Team, the Interpol Works of Art Unit, the Art Loss Register, now holding over 700,000 records, and international law enforcement cooperation have together created an architecture of accountability that did not exist when the Gardner Museum was emptied in 81 minutes. Auction houses require provenance checks. Import regulations have tightened. Forensic tools, multispectral imaging, isotopic analysis, artificial intelligence applied to historical photographic archives continue to develop. And documentary work continues to matter. Published accounts of stolen works, accurate, factual, widely distributed, create the conditions in which identification becomes possible. The Mona Lisa was identified because an art dealer received an approach and acted on his suspicion. The Gardner Museum's maintained public profile has generated investigative leads for 3.5 decades. The Altman restitution was built, in part, by researchers working through Austrian archives, establishing a chain of evidence that legal argument could not overcome. Information leads to recovery. Awareness creates the conditions in which recovery becomes possible. These works belong to no individual. They are part of the documented record of human achievement, produced by artists whose work has outlasted every political system, every criminal network, and every ideology that has tried to claim or exploit them. When they come back, and some of them will, it will be because someone, somewhere, knew something. And because that information found its way to the right place. If you have information about any of the works documented in this series, the Art Loss Register, Interpol, and the FBI Art Crime Team all maintain public channels for reporting. If this documentary proved add value, please hit the like button. Leave a comment with the case that stayed with you most. And if you are not yet to subscribe to Crime Watch Chronicles and turn on notifications so you do not miss future documentaries. Thanks for watching.